workday. We used to meet at the end of the workday, I think 3 to 5. We changed it to the morning, 8 to 10. And about a year ago, we changed it from that 8 to 10 slot to its current 9 to 11 slot at the feedback of several members and based on the results of a doodle poll. So I'm going to take the opportunity to go around. So when you introduce yourself today, tell us ideally when you would like to meet. And we're also going to do a doodle poll to sort of just confirm, because your ideal time and times that you can make it, maybe 2 different subsets. So I'll go ahead and start. I have some flexibility, luckily. I'm body geosic, I use she, her pronouns. I'm the chair of the Parks Board. I'm fine with the time the meetings presently are, but I have flexibility. So I'm happy to adjust them as works for the majority. Let's start with Erin.
Okay, Erin Zolinkop on the Parks Board. So honestly, I am flexible and can see how evening meetings would probably make public comment easier for a lot of people.
Thank you, Erin. I'm going to do staff and board, and I'm just going to mix you all in here. So just a heads up on that. So next up, I have Tim.
Got me there, Bonnie. Hello, Tim Collier, use he, him pronouns. I am the Community Relations Manager for Portland Parks and Recreation. I am flexible as a public servant and also echo the value of creating an opportunity for the public to join the meeting. And so as your Community Relations Manager, that's a priority for me. Also recognize that, we've got a lot of paid public employees here, and there's optics around, having those folks at different parts of the day as well. So just put that out there. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, Tim. Adina.
I echo what Tim said. I'm flexible because this is my work. I do appreciate it not being first thing in the morning, because I spend those first hour or so preparing myself. But otherwise, I'm open. And again, appreciate the remarks around having community, having the meeting time be more accessible for community members, as well as acknowledging that my staff do not, even now, ever work a typical 40-hour work week. And so just always concerned about the burden, and recognize and appreciate their contributions to attending the meeting, because oftentimes subject matter items come up and it's really important for them to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina. Paul, how about you?
Good morning. I'm Paul Agrimis, and I have a lot of flexibility, and definitely hear the argument for having evening meetings to make it easier for people in the community to represent themselves here. So I have a lot of flexibility. Good morning, everybody.
Thanks, Paul. Corbin, what are your thoughts?
I am thinking the evenings might be better, just for what everybody else stated, to make this as open to the community as possible.
Thank you, Corbin. Margaret.
Good morning, Margaret Evans, she, hers, Workforce Development Manager. I'm flexible schedule-wise, so yeah, open and flexible to the needs of the board.
Thanks, Margaret. Todd.
Hi, Todd Lofgren, Deputy Director, Portland Parks and Recreation, he, him pronouns, and happy to be here whenever you choose. And the only thing I'll add is, in the past, we had it in the early morning. I haven't heard anyone advocating for early morning, but that became a problem for parents doing child drop-off for some of the board members.
Thanks, Todd. Tanya, how about you?
Jumping off of mute here. I also, as city employee, am flexible. I also have family responsibilities and appreciate some of the challenges that those with kids in school have with some of the times. Evening times sometimes can be difficult if you have kids that are active in activities too. But as an employee, I'm willing to adjust and meet the needs of the board.
Thank you, Tanya. Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Mike Elliott. I'm very flexible. Slight preference to beginning of the day or end of the day, not so much in the middle, but it's very slight. I'm very open.
Thanks, Mike. Casey?
Morning all, Casey Mills, Vice Chair Board. Since I'm retired, I should be the lowest person on your priority poll. So anytime is going to be fine. I am looking forward to the point where we can actually do this in person at the variety of community centers that the park has.
Agree with you there, Casey. Alana?
So evenings are not great for me, but I also understand the value of making sure we can receive public comment. So if we need to go that way, I can make it work. Earlier in the day would actually be better for me, end of day or something that overlapped the noon hour, just so that it's not taking up a whole morning of work time. But I can certainly be flexible. I work in a world where I can have some flexibility.
Thank you, Alana. Maximo?
Good morning. Yes, like many of the staff here, I am flexible, so whatever works the best for the board, we'll make sure to accommodate. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maximo. Mona?
Hey y'all, Mona Schwartz, Policy Advisor with Commissioner Rubio. She, her pronouns, and agreed, whatever is best for the board, I'm willing to be flexible.
Thanks, Mona. How about you, Allie?
Yeah, Allie Berman, she, her pronouns, and I prefer, mornings are when most meetings are scheduled, so those tend to be hardest. So I like end of the day. I also like evenings for public comment, and I will say I wonder for staff about having something that straddles both, so like a 4 to 6 or a 4:30, you know, something like that, which just might make it a little easier on staff and open it up to the public. So
Thanks, Allie. We'll probably definitely include an option like that on the doodle poll options. David?
Hey, good morning, everybody. David Stazak, board member. I personally am very flexible in terms of my schedule, so we don't need to dance around my schedule, that's for sure. But if it helps get public input to do something late afternoon or something that spans that bridge that Allie just mentioned, I think that would be perfect.
Thanks, David. Lauren?
Morning, Lauren McGuire, Asset and Development Division Manager. Totally flexible, so don't worry about me, but something you might want to think about is you're hearing kind of two dramatically different things here. So you might want to alternate or do a couple of each or something. I don't know if that's more painful or less painful, but something to think about.
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about in the past as well, as doing some kind of alternating thing. So we'll have to give that a little bit more thought too as we come up with our options. Randy, what would your ideal meeting time be?
Oh, I'm flexible, Bonnie, and I'm also ex officio, so I'm not, a voting member. So I'll roll with what others prefer.
Thanks, Randy. You're a valued ex officio member, I will note. Everyone is important. Adrian.
Yeah, also really flexible. Want to go with what's right for the community. I do like that idea of the bridging, evening, but bridging the work hour with allowing people to still have family time, so not having to go too late.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, I think we've heard that, but we also heard that the late afternoon time is hard for, folks with kids who have after school activities. So again, considering maybe potential other options as well. Thank you. Juan, what's your ideal meeting time?
Hi, I'm Juan Piantino. I'm a physician at OHSU. I'm currently on service, and I will be for the next 4 days, 24/7 for a full week. I have my team waiting at the hospital right now, and I have told them that I will be late because of this meeting. It's a matter of priority, guys. Whether you, I mean, you gotta make it work. I have patients waiting to be seen because of this meeting. So, you know, I also have 3 kids, all in elementary school, which I drop at the bus stop, and a dog, which I have to walk every morning. And then I have to pick him up, and et cetera, et cetera. If we start trying to accommodate everybody, it won't work. So how important this is for you? What are you willing to sacrifice for parks? If I had to choose, of course, it would be 6 a.m. Or very late in the evening. I think that I like the idea of alternating time, so members of community can have a say and participate in the meetings. And if I had my pick, it would be late, either very early in the morning or very late in the evening after 6 p.m.
Thank you, Juan. Brian, I know you're new, but I want you to have a voice too.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm a management analyst with Urban Forestry. Yeah, I am flexible as well. I think this will be the only time that I'll be filling in Brooke's capacity, but I have attended in the past when Jen has not been able to attend to represent Urban Forestry. So, but yeah, in general, evenings, whatever works best.
Thanks, Brian. How about you, Kenya?
Whatever works for a common good, I'm flexible.
Thanks, Kenya. Sabrina.
Good morning, Sabrina Wilson, Parks Board. In terms of preference, I think mornings have been working well for me, but I recognize that's not accessible to the public, so I would prioritize that. It's a once a month meeting. I have a flexible job. I do have a 1-year-old, so like either in the evening or in the morning, or a combination of switching back and forth. But there is that transition time after daycare and all that stuff that is important for me. So thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Jen.
Morning, all. Yeah, I'm flexible, whatever works for everyone else.
Thanks, Jen. Lorena, what's your ideal meeting time?
This is kind of works for me. Yeah, Tuesday mornings is good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. I think we heard more of a request for alternating than I've ever heard in the past. So we'll have to look into that seriously. And we'll have to discuss that with whoever ends up filling Brooke's role. So just as a reminder, Brooke has moved on to her new position with the Commissioner's Office. And Brian Lando is filling in. He's a management analyst in urban forestry. So I might stop you if you make a motion or second a motion or talk to say your full name to help Brian out a little bit, or you can say it until he gets to know everybody a little bit. Luckily, we have our names on the Zoom boxes as well. So with that, I hope everybody had a good month and had a chance to look over the minutes from the October meeting, and want to see if there's any discussion on that.
Connie, I just want to note that Corbin has her hand up.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for
Corbin.
that. I was wondering,
didn't see.
is there a moment for us to talk about the change in time versus just announcing what might work best for us versus the community? Is there time to discuss this, or is this something that needs to happen in a future meeting?
Yeah, I wanted to open it up, and since I had heard feedback about wanting to have a little bit of a discussion, and also hearing that the feedback was that for additional substantive matters for the icebreaker. I wanted to use it for the icebreaker to get everybody talking, but it can certainly be something that is discussed in greater detail. I know that it's something that we can work through with the Board Affairs Working Group, or we can have a discussion about it after seeing what a doodle poll reveals in terms of times that people can make it. Because I think it's one thing for everybody to say that they're flexible, and it's sometimes an entirely different thing when we send out options in a doodle poll and then those options come back. I don't have, I'm not saying we're going to make an announcement at the next meeting or anything of a specific change.
I'm not asking for announcements or anything like that. I'm asking, is there a space for open discussion on this? So we have the right understanding behind why we're asking of this.
Sure.
If we don't have time, I can understand that and we can have it at another time. But I think a discussion in public is important to have around this versus in our working group.
That's a good point. And I think we can make space for that. Maybe we can include it in next month's agenda. Again, I kind of wanted to open the discussion for the icebreaker today and didn't sort of intend for it to be in a full discussion. But if everybody agrees that it's a good agenda item, we can certainly have it as an agenda item for next month's meeting. I see Adina's hand up.
Yeah, just quickly, Bonnie, at the Community Engagement Working Group meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion, I'm sure Erin will get into it on her report, around the public comment and access to the meetings by the public. So I might suggest that it's a joint conversation, like let's see what comes out of that conversation, because I think that needs to be overlaid with what's working and not working for current board members. And we can absolutely make space for the next meeting. I'll make note of that when we put together our agenda for next month.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on that topic before we move on to the October minutes? Okay. So any discussion on the October minutes? Brooke sent them out with the agenda. I hope everybody had a chance to look them over. If there's no discussion on that or any suggested revisions, I will entertain a motion from the floor to approve those minutes.
Moved.
I'll move that we approve the October minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Paul. That was Paula Grimace making a motion. Any second? I see Adrian Feldstein's hand up. Any discussion? I see that Corbin is abstaining. I think she was not present at the last meeting. That makes sense. All in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposition? Okay, motion carries, minutes are approved. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Long to provide her director's report.
Great, thank you, Bonnie. Good morning, everyone. This morning, I'd like to tell the board a little bit about some upcoming city council action, provide a Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland update, share some highlights of the annual Oregon Recreation and Parks Association conference, and recap this year's annual Arbor Day event. So on November 10th, Commissioner Rubio will introduce an ordinance that seeks council's authorization for procurement services to issue a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Arrow Heights Park Development Project for an estimated cost of $7,060,000. As a reminder, Arrow Heights Park is a 16-acre park located in Southeast Portland in the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood. This Arrow Heights, Park Improvement Project plans to protect and restore the lower natural wetland and riparian areas, improve and expand existing trails, while also developing the upper plateau area for inclusive play, picnic areas, and escape spot. So the development permit process is nearly complete, and staff are working with procurement services to begin the public low bid solicitation process. When I'm done with my report, I'll put in the chat a link to the council documents if anyone is interested in reading a little bit more about it. Also on December 1st, Assets and Development will present the Parks Improvement Bond annual report at council. Just pause there for a moment to see if anyone has any questions. I can't really see anyone, so shout it out if you do have a question. All right, now I'm going to give a quick update on Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. So Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland has 4 work teams working on the project's main deliverables. Wave 1 of community listening and learning has been completed, and listening data is being coded and synthesized so it can be shared with other work teams to guide their work. This project has been a huge effort and marks an important step forward for the Bureau. This team is planning for Wave 2 of community listening, which will take place from late January, early February through the end of June. The decision support tool pilot has been completed. The team has completed its final review of the pilot and is meeting today to make recommendations for decision support tool version 2 to be used in the fiscal year 22-23 requested budget. The team will also be deciding on a work plan and timelines for a possible version 3 next year. The mission, vision, values, and equity, racial equity tool team is now fully recruited, thankfully, and includes internal staff as well as representatives from community-based or culturally specific organizations that serve the community being centered in Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. We expect the team to kick off in early December. Their work is dependent upon having Wave 1 community listening data synthesized and ready to share. This team will use community listening to guide the drafting of new mission, vision, values, and racial equity statements in January. These drafts will be included for community input in our Wave 2 community listening and learning. These drafts will also inform work to create strong outcomes for Portland Parks and Recreation, which the Bureau currently does not have. Outcomes will ground the work of the final deliverable, the Bureau's actions and results framework. The internal prep team for actions and results has drafted a framework and tested it using information from some of the Bureau's existing guiding plans. The team is working with divisions to make sure we have a performance measure for each levy commitment and capture existing measures that relate to racial equity. This work will be done in time for the fiscal year 22-23 requested budget in late January of 2022. Community members are also being recruited to serve on this team and will begin work in early December to review existing metrics and gaps and help prioritize our work. When the Bureau has draft outcomes in the spring, we'll spend time in 2022 documenting the Bureau's work in the actions and results framework, identifying gaps and prioritizing work to fill those gaps. Again, I'm going to pause. It's a lot of information. We've been doing a lot of work and just wanted to see if anyone has any questions with that report. And I'll ask my staff to help me with answers. Allie?
Sorry, I'm actually just going back to the first thing. I apologize.
No problem.
Question. Arrow Heights is right next to Precision Cast Parts, which is one of the biggest, most heinous polluters. I was wondering if the work being done at Arrow Heights is also going to help with cleanup of arsenic and nickel and other really toxic that are going to certainly impact the community, but also the wetlands there and just the restoration efforts.
My understanding, and I'll ask Lauren to jump in if she has any additional information. My understanding is that BES does have some plans to do some remediation work in the area. I'm not sure if it's specific to the site that you mentioned. Lauren, are you on? And do you have any more information to share?
Yeah, you're right about that, Nadina. Yeah, our project does not include cleanup, but the BES project is supposed to. And I don't know what the long-term, what their timeline looks like right on that right now.
When we find out more information, if it's shared with us, Ally, we can certainly share it with the board through the land use committee. Great. Does anyone else have any questions? All right, I'm just going to move on. Thank you. So I mentioned the Oregon Recreation and Parks Association annual conference. We had 117 people attend, which I think is a record, and I'm sure it's because it was virtual. It was held October 18th through the 21st. This is a statewide professional training for parks and recreation professionals, and it offers opportunities to attend sessions related to innovations and trends in the field of recreation, and to network with professionals across the state, and of course to be recognized for great work and service they provide to their community. The pandemic, post-pandemic work and sort of best practices and lessons learned was very much a theme in this year's annual conference, and I was able to attend a few of the sessions myself, and they were very impressive. I wanted to take a moment to give a few staff shout outs. Andy Amato, who's our aquatic supervisor, served as co-chair for the development and production of the conference itself. Darrell Singleton, who's a manager with our recreation strategies and initiatives, and Elena Bott, who is an aquatics maintenance supervisor, currently serve on the ORPA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And Katie Dunham, who's a city parks planner too, with our assets and development team, and Terry Davis, community center manager, served on multiple committees related to the conference planning and implementation. So we had a very big mark on the conference. So I'm very proud about that. And big news is that Terry Davis is also stepping into a 3-year term as president-elect for the ORPA Board of Directors. So we're going to have some great representation on the board in a statewide capacity. And then finally, I want to mention that Division Manager Tanya Booker received the Special Districts Insurance Services Safety Excellence Award at the conference. So we're really proud of her, and they did a lovely video montage. So congratulations to Tanya, well deserved. She did not know she was getting it, so that was it was a nice surprise. And I guess in closing, I know, although I wasn't able to stay to the end of the event, I hope that board members were able to join us for Portland Arbor Day, which was celebrated on Saturday, October 30th at Lentz Park. The event was organized by Urban Forestry and Community Engagement and had a really nice turnout from many community members and partners. Speakers included our very own city forester, Jen Cairo, Commissioner Rubio, and State Representative Khan, who emphasized the need for trees and urban forestry's longstanding leadership and work on tree planting to address Portland's forest inequity and the climate crisis. There were activities including knot tying lessons from arborists, leave no trace education by the rangers, tree giveaways, crafts with recreation, and there was even a DJ spinning some great tunes. And of course, partners and volunteers planted 10 trees in the park with community members, and there's going to be 23 more that are going to be added this winter. And Lentz neighborhood in general is going to be a focus for community tree planting this coming season. So it was a great event. That event apparently what used to be very, very large, and then due to capacity and also not really reaching the people we needed to reach, it kind of got shrunk a little bit, and now we're seeing about what it looks like to increase capacity again. So much thanks to Tim Collier and his team for helping Urban Forestry make it a little bit more robust this year. It was really nice. And sunny and dry, but very windy. I'm going to take a moment to pass the mic to Todd. Given the conversation around in-person meetings, I thought it was an opportune time to give you all an update on the vaccine policy that's coming or has been released just this week regarding vaccine policy for contractors, volunteers, and vendors. And this is applicable to the Parks Board. So Todd.
All right. Good morning, everybody. As Director Long said, the Office of Management and Finance for the city has been leading this effort, came out with some new guidance for contractors, volunteers, and grantees. And we kind of have like an interim stage between November 8th and January 3rd. And then we kind of go into full force effect of the policy starting January 3rd. And what it means is for volunteers and grantees, for instance, is when they're inside a city work site for longer than 15 minutes, they're required to wear a enhanced filtration face covering, such as a KN95 or an N95 mask. So regular cloth mask wouldn't be acceptable, but the city will be providing those to volunteers and grantees when they're on sites as they're needed. And then after January 3rd, the volunteers and grantees inside city work places, again, for more than 15 minutes, they would have to comply with proof, showing a proof of vaccination or verification of a negative COVID test within 72 hours prior to the activity. Again, this is all for inside activities. So for all our many volunteers that are outside, this policy doesn't apply. And while we don't have the system set up, that's why we have this kind of lag and implementation of the policy till January 3rd. The city will be setting up a system to make sure we can verify people's vaccination records, but keep those private and not hold those within a city system. And so happy to share the guidance as that was just distributed, and we can send it out to all the Parks Board so all of you have it, and can try to answer any questions now. Or we can make this an agenda item for next month too, if people have more questions.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Adina. Does anyone have any questions for Todd or Adina? Casey.
Question for Todd. You might have said this and I just missed it. So for interfacing with the public after January 3rd, if it is for more than 15 minutes, but they're public, required to have COVID vaccination?
No, so just a visitor to a city facility, this isn't required. This is for volunteers, grantees, or contractors. So someone going into a community center, not having to provide a proof of vaccination.
Paul had a question as well. Go ahead, Paul.
Sabrina had her hand up first. So I think we should go to Sabrina first.
Oh, I don't see Sabrina's. Sorry, Sabrina. Go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you. You kind of changed my question, Todd, with your last answer, because I was going to ask, how are we equipping staff, especially community center staff, to deal with, you know, having to ask for proof of vaccination? But it sounds like with contractors and stuff, that process will probably happen before they show up somewhere. I'm just thinking about interfacing with people, and people have strong feelings about vaccines, and making sure the staff aren't put in harm's way because people are, you know, mad about that.
Right. Yeah, I think for just the normal visitor coming into city facility, they won't have to address this policy. I will highlight for us as an organization, both the compliance for volunteers is a big deal. When we surveyed volunteers, we knew this was coming. And so we went out and surveyed volunteers for our Golden Ball program. And more than a third of the volunteers said they wouldn't comply with the policy. And so we actually scaled down the program this year because of that. And I also see it as a challenge for because we have a vaccination requirement also for our employees. And so for very part-time seasonal workforce to comply with the vaccination policy, as well as if someone, there's an exemption process as well that someone can go through. But even if they have the exemption process, then they are required to do the testing if they're a city employee. And so that barrier for someone that may only work for us for a very short time might be a large barrier. And so then it'll be harder to hire for seasonal casual employees. So for us, I see lots of organizational challenges, even though for the customer or the visitor, this won't apply to them.
Thanks, Todd. Paul, did you put your hand down? And so Erin, and then hopefully we can wrap this up. We can talk about this more at the next meeting as well, if we want to have an agenda item on it. Go ahead, Erin.
Well, I actually have something unrelated, but it's brought it up for me. So I just want to say it, which is that I've been surprised at how hard it can be to find a vaccine for 5 to 11. I thought it'd be more accessible than it was. Is there any conversations about having events at community centers? I know some of PPS schools are doing it, but not all of them. And it'll probably be a slower rollout than what happened with adult vaccines. There's no mass vaccination sites, which I think is fine, but I understand that with the kids, but I've been kind of surprised as a parent of a young child how difficult it's been, and making it accessible in all parts of the community would be, or all locations in Portland. Community centers might be a great place for something like that. Oh, there is one at Rosewood Community Center. Oh, that's great. So I guess, yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any more thought about that or plans in the works.
We have had vaccination sites at the community centers in the past. And so we can keep you updated if that happens again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not thinking of me personally. I'm thinking of, having that as a thing for the 5 to 11 group, because I know it's a different different dosage and all of that, different requirements. So
we're not running the clinic, so we are, would just be in host. So it's when the county or some other service provider requests space, but we do make the space available.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Todd or Adina on the director's report? If not, we'll move into the working group reports. We'll start with community engagement with Erin.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see, let's get going. Let me get my notes up. We started with this conversation around meeting time. So that was a conversation that we began at the community engagement working group in a broader conversation around improving accessibility, transparency, and removing barriers for participation at board meetings. The conversation continued in some ways at the Board Affairs Working Group, looking at our, it's been a topic we've talked about for a while, but looking at our public comment procedure and thinking how to revise that to, Corbin had some really great suggestions, even having public comment at the beginning of a meeting and the ending of a meeting, for instance, for people that couldn't make it to the beginning. Maybe not having people have to submit it in advance, so that they can just, it's an open forum, just removing those barriers. So we started a conversation around that. I know Casey, Corbin, myself, and Nova are going to be talking further about it in the near future. And so that's a continuing conversation. So just an update on that. A lot of our meeting was spent talking about continuing the conversations around the statues that came up at the last board meeting. So I'm going to give an update on that. So originally, what we're talking about here is 5 different statues that were taken down and damaged during protests in 2020. The issue was originally brought up by Patty, who had concerns about a proposal from Regional Arts and Culture Council to replace toppled statues in the South Park blocks. Via email, before our last board meeting, there was some input from Corbin as thinking about this as an opportunity to move towards a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive park system. And there was input from Nova about having a robust discussion around how these decisions are made, and then also around thinking about the language we use when we're talking to each other, I think, too. So it was at that point, we had a brief discussion about it at the last board meeting, and then it was sent to Community Engagement Working Group to discuss further. I invited Regional Arts and Culture Council's Director of Public Art, Kristen Calhoun, to come discuss with our group. I want to give you just a little bit of background that I'm not sure that everybody's aware about, and then talk about what kind of the next steps are. So just first a background about Regional Arts and Culture Council that some of you might know, which is that it was formed in the 70s. It used to be called Metropolitan Arts Commission, and it was a government agency. In the 90s, it became what it is today, Regional Arts and Culture Council. It's a public charity, a nonprofit agency, which has long-term intergovernmental contracts between the city of Portland and Multnomah County. One thing that's important to note is that the city bureaus themselves own the land and fixtures that statues are on. RAC's role is, RAC doesn't own any of that. Its role is around care and maintenance of public art. So if art, statues, things like that are damaged, RAC is responsible for the restoration and repair. So just again, there are 5 statues that are in question. I could name them all for you, but I'm not going to right now. Most of our discussion was at the last board meeting was on the 2 that are in the South Park blocks, but they're it's not just those 2 that is in discussion. It's actually 5. I want to note that RAC itself can't make decisions around statues. They can only make recommendations with which city council can either adopt or not adopt. RAC's recommendation, this was back in October, but RAC's recommendation was to not replace the statues, besides the elk statue, in the exact location and in the exact manner that they were previously placed. So I think it's important to note that distinction. Their recommendation wasn't, oh, never replace these statues. It was, don't put them up in the exact same place in the exact same way that they were. We had a further conversation around the history of those statues, about a conversation around how the statues themselves are part of a larger conversation. It's not necessarily just about those 5 statues, for instance. But in the end, where I want to land this is that right now where we're at is Commissioner Rubio is requesting $50,000 in the fall budget monitoring process to hire an outside consultant to run public engagement. So I think we can all agree in a lot of ways that what we're looking for is a robust public engagement process that doesn't have preordained outcomes and that truly works to engage communities, and not just maybe the loudest, but to engage all communities. So that's where I'm landing for my update. I would love for any input from other community engagement working group members or other board members on, and I know we have Mona here too, who might have further information for people. Did I leave anything out? Were there parts of the conversation that you feel like I didn't capture that you want known?
Thank you, Erin. Was there any additions by other members of the community working group? I see Sabrina's hand up.
I just have a question. Maybe I missed this information somewhere, but Commissioner Rubio is requesting $50,000 to do public engagement on what to do with these 5 statues. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's that, and it's to develop a policy based on that engagement for what we do in the future with around statues and when this sort of situation arises again.
I want to note too, I should have said that I didn't know that. I don't think actually that was even a thing at the time of our last meeting. So I think that that's a development since we met as a group.
Is there no body that's already within the city that could run that? Or is, I guess, because technically it's RAC just maintains them. They don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do the engagement, but there's no like bureau that currently exists that could do that.
Yeah, we explored that and thought that it's going to be such a heavy lift and a lot of work, and the city is already so lacking for staff in certain areas, and it would be a really big ask of any one entity. And there was also not really a specific entity that is the right home for it. So that's why we thought an outside partner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona, for providing the additional information. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the financial sustainability work group. Mike?
Great, thanks, Bonnie. So my update will be relatively brief. The meeting that we were supposed to have last week with our working group had to be moved to next week because it conflicted with City Council's fall bump work session. Just to give you, I got a couple updates though from that work session. One is that the presentation that Parks made to City Council sounds like it went off without a hitch, and staff expects the proposal to be heard by Council on Wednesday and approved without any changes. And in addition to that, we're all aware that there's a $62 million budget surplus that comes out of the last fiscal year. This is expected to be a one-time surplus. With that said, the mayor's bump submission as it's filed includes 3 allocations that would affect Park from that surplus. And that would be the allocation of $4.2 million for major maintenance funding to be spent on projects in East Portland, $200,000 for a Dawson Park history project, and approximately $89,000 for Pioneer Courthouse Square livability enhancements, which revolve around graffiti, structural repairs, and security. So those 3 items are in flux, and we'll see how those play out once the council votes. As Dina mentioned, Parks has started working on their 22-23 fiscal budget development. So that process never ends. So we'll probably have updates on that in the coming months. And then we also know that there's a second round of interviews this week for the Jason's old position for the financial planning and analysis manager. And then other than that, our meeting next week, we have multiple staff members presenting to us. Dylan Paul is going to talk with us about partnerships and property and business development. And then Chris Silke and Sarah Huggins are going to talk to us about the deferred maintenance gap and the next steps on the capital side of sustainable future. So that should be some pretty good, meaty, important stuff to talk about that we'll be reporting back probably in the next month. Thanks. Any questions or any comments from anybody else in the group?
Thanks, Mike, for that great report as usual. Any questions for Mike or any additions from anybody else on that working group?
I'll just note that Mona put in the chat that tomorrow is the first public hearing of the fall bump, an opportunity for public testimony, and November 17th is the planned vote on the fall.
Great. Thank you, Mona, and thank you, Director Long, for pointing that out. We'll move on to the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group. Patty is not available, so David, I believe.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I certainly don't have as charming of an accent as Patty, but I'll do my best. We had a pretty good meeting, I think, with the group. We started with some discussion on the EQRB, or the Burnside Bridge Replacement project, and that's under a large amount of pressure right now in terms of its budget. So Patty and Randy are both on the kind of oversight committee for that project. So I think they're able to help along with the kind of pressures with that to make sure that we're still going to get the kind of bridge that the city deserves, not just trying to value engineer it down before there's any design to it yet. We're trying to get a presentation to this group from the city sometime soon so that they can inform us a little bit more on what's really going on with that. So I think we're trying to target that for some time a little bit later in the year, specifically when Patty's back. Of the main topics, that was one of the big ones that we talked about. And then we have a running kind of watch list of topics, and we hit some discussion around the level of service criteria, and that I think we wanted to maybe have a smaller meeting or organize a little bit smaller meeting about understanding the level of service criteria a little bit more for some of these projects. And we walked through the Metro local share list item by item. That's out for public feedback already. So as a group, we were able to get some insight on the individual projects there. There's, of course, many more projects on the list than the budget requires. So that's where some of that level of service criteria will come into play. We had a discussion around whether or not the group Portland Parks wants to participate in any sort of Olmsted 200 celebration. The 200th, anniversary of Olmsted's birthday is, I believe, next year. So I think we've got some time to plan if and how we want to be involved in any sort of celebrations around that. And then Randy gave us a great update on what's happening at the Rose City Playground with their new upgrades to that. And so that's kind of a super high level overview of what we talked about. And anyone else on the group that was there, please jump in with something that I skimmed over too much, too quickly, or left out.
That was great. Thank you, David. Anyone have anything to add or any questions for David? If not, we'll move on to the Board Affairs Working Group. Casey.
Thank you, Bonnie. The Board Affairs Working Group had its first working session, and the majority of that was taken up by the public comment procedure, which Aaron has already covered. So I'm going to take this little time that I've got to invite members of the board, including ex officio members, as well as all park staff, to see if they have any comments on any of the issues that we're going to be looking at in the near future. So I'm simply going to list those issues and then ask anyone who's on this call to contact me if they would like to add their 2 cents, bits, opinions, questions, comments, whatever, on any of these issues. And the first one is, of course, the public comment procedure that we're presently working on. Second one is updating the board's mission. The third one is process for board or board members to comment on programs and policies outside the board. Fourth is most effective use of the board members in helping PP&R and PP&R staff. Fifth is improving relationship among board members and between board members and PP&R leadership and staff. And then the last one is the absentee policy for board members and enforcement if someone is absent. So again, if anybody who is not on the working group has any ideas or comments about any of those issues, please contact me by email or phone. Love to talk to you about it. That's it.
Thank you, Casey. Did any other members have anything to add, or were there any questions for Casey on that report? Go ahead, Paul.
Just a quick question. Casey, you mentioned 6 items and I didn't catch the 4th one as I was taking my notes. So after most effective
use of board members in helping PP&R and PP&R staff. Probably a good idea if I kind of put these in the chat so you guys can take a look at them as well.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks,
Yeah, that'd be
Casey.
great. Thanks.
I see Mike's hand up.
Yeah, the only question I had that's good stuff to talk about. And the one that you specifically mentioned that Paul asked about is how we can better help staff. Are you soliciting input from staff on that as well?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Any other questions, comments? Staff input? Next, we have the Process Improvement Ad Hoc, and I just have a very brief report. And I actually, and I think Adina will correct me if I get anything wrong here, but as you know, this is the interagency working between the Parks Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services at Nick Fish's request to improve efficiencies. And my understanding is that at this point, there is going to be an interagency agreement between the 2 bureaus. Now, is it on natural areas or on tree planting?
Well, this is about tree planting, and we're at the very, very beginnings.
Okay.
The bureaus have consulted with city attorneys, but we have not worked out the scope or any details on the agreement as yet.
Yeah, so it's going to be an intergovernmental agreement between the 2 bureaus, and at this point, it's not Linda Law, it's Rob, the urban forester attorney that works with the urban forestry group, and the one who works for the BES. I believe Eric is his name. And so I understand that that's going to be coming together, and we'll keep the Parks Board informed as that intergovernmental agency agreement gets worked out. So anything to add on that, Jen, maybe, or even Brian?
No, there's nothing to add, Bonnie.
Thank you. Okay, any questions on any of the working groups from anyone? If not, we'd love the report of the Parks Foundation. Randy.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. So our discussions continue with the senior management team at PPR on kind of the future relationship, new MOU, and future projects to work on together in the sort of post-levy environment. We've had one meeting and a lot of exchanges, and there's research being done with some other foundations and Parks and Rec organizations in other cities. So we're kind of doing a little bit of a reboot of the relationship, which we hope to complete that work by the end of the year. And other news, as David mentioned, we are working hard and close to having an agreement on a new playground structure for Rose City Playground. There's a community group that's been working on this for a couple of years and has raised a little bit of money. And it's a park that isn't on necessarily the high priority list with PPR because of work that's been done to other parks in the area, just kind of the way the lines are drawn. But ironically, it's right across the street from an affordable housing complex that's owned by the city, and as you know, over 200 kids, directly across the street, who are income challenged and whatnot. So this will be a really great addition to that park. It's a very dreary set of playground pieces that are there now that are pretty run down and non-functional. So we're very close to inking a deal that we think will serve as a template for doing future playground projects. So more on that, more of the specifics on that after my board's voted on it. We are also doing a second round of our Portland Parks Posters project, say that quickly. And the deadline for, we're putting out an RFQ for that for designers, primarily designers. Artists who can design are okay too, but it's any artist who applies has to have some either design knowledge or paired with a designer. And the due date for entries on that is November 30th, and I'll dig out the link to the RFQ for that and put it in the chat. And we're really excited about that. We are moving into our third printing on one of the posters we did in the last round. We did kind of traditional parks, Laurelhurst Peninsula. Why am I suddenly blanking on the other? Oh, Alberta, and then the Wildwood Trail in the last round, and all have gone into second printing. And Peninsula has been just a raving seller. So we're going into third printing on that for the holiday season. It's been a very successful project. We're really excited to do some different parks and maybe a new park or two in the next round. And then lastly, my board voted in favor last week of rebooting our summer festival that we unfortunately were sort of T-boned by the Delta surge. It's called Paseo, and it was a trauma-informed community gathering of artists. We did a pivot, which you can see on our website, or actually, I'll put that in the chat too, Paseo PDX /challenge. And, so the performers were able to perform. We did some videos and whatnot, but it was really far shy of, obviously, of what we wanted to do, and a really exciting thing that we were going to do on the South Park blocks in terms of really having a POC driven, festival. And so we're excited about continuing that effort next year, sponsors willing, and, get to finally, do the festival that we really wanted to do downtown in terms of really just kind of recreating what the notion of what a downtown festival could be. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions, and I'll put those links in the chat here shortly.
Thanks, Randy. Adrian put a question in the chat. She was asking if the parks for the next round of posters have been selected, and then I see Corbin's hand is up.
Yeah, they have not been. The way we did it last time was we asked the designers to put forward their sort of 3 top picks. It's always nice to have people who want to do a particular park. Not all of them got their top picks, and we worked it to. We had sort of specific parks in mind, and we kind of found a balance between what the designers wanted to do and what we felt like we wanted to try out on this first effort. We really were nervous about it. It was a large expenditure of money that we weren't sure we would ever see again. So this time we're doing kind of the same thing, but we'll have, again, some expert designers on the jury, and this time last time we had 2 board members as well, but we'll probably have a few more board members, this time, and the jury. We'll find some middle ground between what the designers want to do and what we would like to do, or what we think we can actually make a successful run of posters with. Does that answer your question, Adrian? Okay. Yeah, Corbin.
I love this idea, continuing this work. My question is whether or not if you find a painting or a design that is coming from a non-traditional designer or somebody that is not professional, are you going to link them with a designer to create that print? Or are you looking just for professional designers at this point? I just want some clarification on that.
Yeah, we want to kind of stick with professional designers, this time around. If we move forward in the future, we might think about, trying some different approaches. But we would like to complete these next 4 posters within our sort of framework of our 20th anniversary, which ends in May. And so we're doing a lot of outreach to the design schools and as widely as possible. I've been doing a lot of individual outreach to designers, but we're not going to, we don't have anybody that we're working with who could translate, say, whatever, an outsider artist's, depiction of a park into a design. We're so letting really putting the designers forward.
And I'm looking at Adrian's comment, and this is kind of where I'm coming from. You might want to consider challenging professional designers to link up with community artists, or folks that just don't have the designing background. It'd be really nice to see all of the art that comes out of Portland, even if it's non-traditional or not necessarily coming from a professional point of view. It's important for community members to see themselves in what we're producing.
Indeed. And we're certainly open to that. We haven't done specific outreach in that direction, but we certainly could.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Randy? Thanks for the report, Randy.
You bet. Thank you.
For the input. With that, Margaret, we are really anxious to hear about workforce development.
Good morning. Well, thank you, Bonnie. Workforce Development is looking forward to presenting this morning. Joining me today is Riley Clark-Long. He's the Workforce Development Analyst on my team, and he's going to be driving the presentation. I'll kick us off and then hand it over to him. So again, just want to say thank you for having us come this morning and provide you with an update. We presented a workforce update back in July about the progress toward the levy ramp up and ongoing projects related to that effort. We wanted to come to you today with a high-level refresher on what we spoke about over the summer, and importantly, present you an update on levy recruitment and hiring data, and on the workforce development-led process improvement project. And when I say process improvement project, you might have also heard me refer to it as our lessons learned project. So today we're going to provide a refresher on our goals and our outreach. We're going to give you an update on our seasonal and regular recruitment and hiring. And we're going to talk about moving forward, which is our lessons learned and our next steps. We are probably all familiar with these priorities, but just want to refresh ourselves. Given the park's local option levy priorities of protecting and growing nature, recreation for all, and community partnerships, and the work associated with achieving those priorities, it was clear once the levy had been approved by voters that we needed to expand and adjust our staffing levels of both employees to ramp up and sustain the Bureau capacity to work on levy projects and priorities. This increases capacity to support our internal operations, to deliver programming to the community and support our parks and natural areas. We also want to increase our racial and ethnic diversity of Bureau staffing through our levy hiring. And also all of this while continuing to manage our ongoing recruitment and hiring for non-levy positions, because that definitely continued, both by positions becoming vacant, people growing within the organization and promoting into other positions, which in turn opened up their positions for recruitment. And so that's just a general kind of get us a refresher of where we're at today. I'm going to turn it over to Riley to talk about outreach and take us through a couple items.
Thank you, Margaret. And as Margaret mentioned, we came to you all last July. Seems like a long time ago now, but we wanted to reiterate a couple of these items that you might have heard about a little bit before, just to reiterate their importance, but also to update you on anything that has changed since then. One of the key areas where our team itself has worked towards one of those levy priorities that Margaret just mentioned, the priority of community partnerships, has been through this avenue of community outreach. Since last March, when the position was filled, the PP&R talent acquisition specialist has been coordinating with our Bureau hiring managers, the Bureau of Human Resources recruitment team, and of course, our community partners. Our teams have worked to involve community partners really from the beginning to the end of the process. That included attending, hosting, and planning virtual career fairs with community partners. It included utilizing social media and print marketing for outreach and working with partners to distribute and boost those materials. We also worked with partners to host community-specific workshops to provide how to apply informational sessions to potential applicants as recruitment started to open earlier this year. And towards the end of the process, community partners also sat in on and assisted with some of the interview panels for key recruitments. So we're continuing to work with these partners now, and we plan to continue working with them once again for career fairs, key parts of that interview process, and collaborating to distribute information and assistance to potential applicants in the community. Like I had said, throughout Ramp Up, we did work with such a wide variety of community partners, many listed here on the slide. The partners range from schools to community-specific nonprofit organizations and networks to other similar organizations. And we will continue working with many of these partners over the coming years. I won't read through them all today, but you may be familiar with many of these organizations. So again, speaking of those levy priorities and supporting them in Ramp Up, especially recreation for all and growing and protecting nature, the Bureau really needed to restaff our seasonal workforce in 2021 to offer summer programming and to work on our seasonal park and asset maintenance. Work groups where we recruited and hired a significant number of seasonal staff are listed here on the side. As you can see, this is a wide assortment of work groups that interact with almost every facet of our large Parks and Rec system. And I'll be speaking about some figures, some updated data of hiring and applicants, and all of these figures are current as of October 31st, 2021. And so as of that date, we have had over 3,500 applicants to seasonal jobs in the calendar year 2021. Of those applicants, it's interesting to note that 35% identified as BIPOC. Processing and interviewing over 3,000 applications, of course, was a big lift, but our teams have done a great job despite the time crunch. However, we will acknowledge that volume of applications and interviews has been challenging for everyone. And so this is something that the workforce team is looking at as part of that extensive project to collect lessons learned from levy ramp up and make process improvements for future hiring, recruitment, and onboarding. And I'll mention that more later on in the presentation. So of those 3,500 applicants, also as of October 31st, there were a little over 1,100 total hires for casual seasonal positions this calendar year. You can see here where the majority of those hires were made in the work groups listed on the slide. As you may notice, with 3,500 applicants and a little over 1,100 hires, that leaves roughly 2,400 applicants that were not placed. Reasons for that vary on a case-by-case basis. Some reasons include applicants were offered positions but declined. Applicants did not respond to hire or interview offers. Applicants found other work while waiting to hear back from us on the recruitment. Or other qualified applicants had already been hired to fill the position and it was no longer available. The high volume of recruitment and the collective organization-wide challenge of navigating and implementing new processes this year did end up impacting recruitment timelines and resulted in some lags, which contributed to some applicants finding other work while waiting to hear back from the Bureau. Reducing the wait from recruitment to hire is also part of that larger lessons learned process improvement project that we've mentioned here. Importantly, big part of the hiring picture is the demographics of who was hired. For casual seasonal recruitment so far this calendar year, as of October 31st, 36% of the hires were BIPOC and 64% were white. At the same time, as the Bureau reestablished our large seasonal workforce, we also were recruiting for newly created full-time positions and pre-existing vacancies. Through the levy ramp up, we invested in the creation of 50 new full-time positions and filling over 20 existing vacancies. Again, as of October 31st, there have been almost 2,000 applicants to full-time positions. It's important to note that 33% were identified as BIPOC applicants. And this applicant pool was actually more racially diverse than has been typically seen over the last 5 years, which is an encouraging sign and trend. This year, there have been over 40 hires of full-time staff, and that includes filling existing vacancies, recently open vacancies, and of course, those newly created positions. A group of positions are wrapping up their recruitments with interviews, selections, and offering occurring almost as we speak. There are interview panels ongoing right now and throughout much of the month. I've been on a few myself, including next week. So we're finishing up to 25 additional remaining hires for regular positions by the end of the calendar year. To support this effort, the workforce team has hired an additional part-time employee and just completed interviews to hire a second part-time employee. Again, an incredibly important part of this piece are the demographics of who was hired. Again, as of October 31st, for full-time recruitments, we've had 43% BIPOC hires for full-time regular staff. So we've been talking about levy recruitment and hiring figures so far. The figures on this slide, I want to be clear, refer to the entire Bureau workforce. So that includes not only new hires, but all our currently filled positions as well. And that's also an important thing to look at as part of this. The Bureau's current total workforce is 66% white and 34% BIPOC as of October 31st. You can see here it's slightly different for our regular staff and casual and seasonal staff. Overall, our data indicates that hiring during levy ramp up has supported our ongoing goal of creating and sustaining a racially diverse workforce. It's exciting to be able to continue this momentum into next year because we acknowledge there is still plenty of room and opportunities to grow. The data for applicant, hiring, and overall employee demographics all indicate continued growth in this area, which is an encouraging trend. So as we continue to dive deeper into that demographic and hiring numbers, the workforce team is also hard at work on another project that I've alluded to a few times already, and that we mentioned briefly last time we were together here in July. Over the summer of 2021, our team identified an opportunity to take an intentional pause and invest time in a feedback process. After more than 6 months of recruitment and hiring for ramp up, which involved high volume and quick turnaround and new processes, we really wanted to take stock of successes and challenges looking forward towards 2022. The workforce team collected feedback from stakeholders in Portland Parks and Rec, our partners in the Bureau of Human Resources, and the community. We hosted a series of focus groups covering recruitment, community partnerships, hiring experiences, and more. These focus groups resulted in around 12 hours of conversation, over 50 pages of notes, and engaged around 60 stakeholders. This feedback was then used to create a set of 65 process improvement recommendations to address challenges or inefficiencies or replicate areas of success. So far of those 65, 9 are already complete, 43 are ongoing, and 13 are still to be started. To just give us a little sample of some of the feedback we heard and some of the process improvements that we've set out to address them, I'll just give a couple examples here. One example of common feedback we heard was that after COVID-19 and the pandemic, many managers and supervisors had not hired in over a year. Because processes had changed in that time, some felt unprepared, perhaps even rushed to learn new systems on top of their existing workload, which was challenging. While we provided hiring toolkits and other resources for hiring and recruitment, we discovered a need for additional training. So we're already working to ensure all hiring managers and supervisors receive training in the recruitment, hiring, and onboarding systems we use here at Portland Parks and Rec, some of which are actually relatively new. Another piece of feedback that we heard was a desire for some more assistance or structure putting together interview panels and questions. The workforce team has been adding new capacity in the form of both full-time and part-time positions, and that will boost our ability to provide assistance in this area. Simultaneously, we'll think about some of the processes we use for these larger recruitments and interview processes and think about improving them. But this just really scratches the surface. Our process improvement recommendations span a variety of categories that cover really the entire hiring and recruitment cycle and onboarding as well. This is a sample of the major, here at the bottom of the slide, here are some of the categories that those 65 process improvements fall into. And again, it really highlights the wide range of feedback. It covers marketing and community outreach, recruitment processes, interviews, like I mentioned, hiring managers and supervisors capacity, employee onboarding, tracking and reporting recruitments, and some of our own internal processes and forms here at the Bureau. So I'll leave you off here with some updates about some upcoming next steps and ongoing work. We began, I'll just give a quick training program update, which we're really happy to share. We began in 2021 actually with just one full-time staff member dedicated Bureau-wide to training. The levy ramp-up investments have allowed us to expand this program, adding 2 new staff members that will specialize in safety and DEI training respectively. That will leave our existing training coordinator capacity to manage professional development, onboarding, and related training program projects. So we're really excited by this and just wanted to share. And it's really good timing as we think about bringing on so many new park staff. Speaking of that, we're already hard at work planning the outreach, recruitment, and hiring for 2022. As we know, year one will feature another round of significant hiring and recruitment for full-time and seasonal positions. The Bureau has already requested 90.5 FTE for this stage, and an internal creation of those positions is underway. We're paving the way for recruitments to begin in earnest in 2022. Many of these positions will be in our urban forestry, land stewardship, and assets and development divisions, and really help us with that levy priority of growing and protecting nature, among others. And as we work to create and recruit those positions in this upcoming year, the workforce team will, of course, also work with partners to implement those process improvements I mentioned and continue to track and monitor applicant and hire demographic data as we receive reports. So that's just a little preview to what we'll be up to over the next few months. And I'll leave it off here for an opportunity to turn it over to questions and discussion. I'll stop sharing my screen when I figure out how.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you, Margaret. I see Corbin's hand is up.
Thank you for the presentation. I do want to make a comment and maybe follow it up with a question. I get concerned when we use white and BIPOC as the two stand-ins for racial identity. And as great as it is that we're hearing that you're hiring more BIPOC communities, unfortunately, it still sets the stage for a white supremacist not quite an anti-racism read on what's going on by funneling all non-white people into this BIPOC categorization. And I was wondering, in the future, if you don't already have it, is there any way to disaggregate the racial percentages to put them in Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Middle Eastern to find out who is actually being hired? Because although it might seem that we're becoming more diverse, but that diversity might be invisibilized by this blanket term of BIPOC. So who from those communities are being hired and where are they being placed is something I would really like to know. And I think just for future, I would really love to break that binary of white and non-white folks conversation if we can moving forward. I don't know if this is typical of Portland, but I think it's contributing to a lot of misinformation, and it could also be contributing to a understanding of maybe white folks losing their grip on things versus understanding that there's white folks, Black folks, Asian folks, Latinx, Middle Eastern, all these other folks that all come under that umbrella. So I would love to have a little bit more information to really understand the numbers behind the BIPOC categorization, if possible, in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Corbin. Really good points. And we'll definitely do that in the future because we can break that down further and so can provide that information. So we'll definitely take that forward with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Corbin. I see Adrian, Casey, and Sabrina's hands up. I'm going to go in that order.
Thanks. Yeah, I was curious. So it sounds like you have a lot of applicants, many times the number of applicants, and you have job positions, but was wondering about, by category of employment. So in the past, I was aware that it was difficult, for example, to get swim staff. So do you have that broken down to sort of see where there's a lot of interest and where, we need to do better getting interest?
Riley, go ahead.
Yeah, sure, I can speak to that. The data we receive is specific for each recruitment, so it is possible to go back and look at how many applicants there were for each specific recruitment. This year we've had dozens and dozens and dozens, so I didn't necessarily want to go into each specific one in this presentation, but we can follow up about specific recruitments if we would like. That data is available, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Adrian. Corbin, if your hand is still up as a legacy hand, you might want to put it down so I don't forget. Casey and then Sabrina.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Riley and Margaret. Appreciate it. I've got two questions. I think they're both very short. First one is, do your numbers include hiring at golf courses that the city owns and runs or
Yes,
not?
yes,
Okay,
it
there are.
includes.
Okay, great. And then the other one is for improvements on community outreach. Do you have some examples of that, or do you have some way that we can take a look in terms of what suggestions might have been for for improvements in community outreach?
Our community outreach, so just to provide a little bit more information, at the beginning of this, we partnered with 7 community organizations that we had existing grants with and expanded our partnership with them. And what that meant is that we worked directly with specific individuals. We had career fairs specifically with those community organizations. And we also partnered with them with our teen force to help fill our teen force positions. And so it was really working with them and also creating a community partner council where we're actually meeting on a regular basis, where we're bringing together the partners to talk about how are we doing with outreach? What does it look like? Are we doing virtual career fairs? Also, a lot of the community partners provided career coaches to the youth that were employed with us so that they were a point of contact. If individuals, were trying to get adjusted, for many, it was their first employment as a youth. So, having a connection with somebody at the organization that they already have a relationship with, also connecting them with our teams. So some of the things that as we were moving forward, community partners said, going forward, keep us involved in the entire process. And so as we were going throughout the year, that's when we started including also in interview panels, our contacts and reaching out to our partners for that. And that's something that they indicated strongly as we move forward. They really want to be involved. Also, with the positions that we'll be adding in the fall budget request for 2022, a lot of them, Riley mentioned land stewardship, our assets and development team, urban forestry. Several of the organizations, we've started talking with them now about some of the entry-level positions, and we're also creating apprentice and trainee programs, and we'll be working closely with our community team to help fill those positions. So hopefully that helps, gives you a little bit more information. Great. Thank you, Casey. Sabrina?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I had a question on a comment that was made about this is the hiring that just happened has been more diverse than like the past 5 years. And so what I'm curious about is, now that these people are hired, what is retention and what is the support? Because as the workforce is diversifying, keeping the status quo and the culture might not be conducive for a diverse team. And so for the staff, but also for those managers and supervisors, how are they being equipped to be good supervisors and managers to diverse teams? And maybe this, is not something you can fully answer yet, but if anything, just a note to be thinking through that as well.
No, Sabrina, that's a really great note. And I can give you a little bit and then more to follow. One of the things that we realized is this was also an opportunity to invest in employee development, which speaks to employee value and how they feel about the organization and the culture in which we work. And so Riley touched on it briefly, but we had one trainer that was responsible for training, and it really didn't address how we needed to invest in our employees, our frontline employees, our supervisors and managers. And so we've added the safety position, but we've also added a diversity, equity, and inclusion trainer that actually she starts on Monday. Natalise is joining us. She's moving up from California, originally from Venezuela. And she Ashley is going to be really focused on moving our efforts forward. And a lot of it has to do with culture and the welcoming environment and how are we working together as employees and as an organization. She's going to be partnering really closely with Jody, our existing trainer on employee development. So there's one aspect. Also, we are working on supervisor manager training in general, recognizing it really came out in lessons learned that we just forged ahead this year. And we really needed to step back and take a look also at how we were equipping our supervisors and managers on that. Also, a lot of it has to do with training because I think that speaks to culture. We're working right now on developing career tracks and professional development within the organization. How do people grow? How do they work together? So I think that there's some beginnings. There's still more to do, and I think that's some really good points, Sabrina. We'll keep the board informed as we continue to grow through that.
I see two more hands up. I see Aaron first, then Adrian.
Yeah, I was wondering, just kind of on that, on a similar note, I know there was the reporting by OPB about the survey for Black workers in the city of Portland that came back with 49% of respondents saying they felt tokenized at work. And I'm wondering if there have been conversations in the Bureau about that survey, if that actually applied, if that was PPR Bureau as well. I'm not sure if it was the whole city or what, but I'm just curious about what the response has been within the Bureau.
I believe the OPB article was about the employees or the citywide survey as a whole. Riley, I know that you're joining us this morning and you're really familiar with the park specific employee survey. Is there some input that maybe you'd like to provide on that?
When we do internal employee surveys, there's the option, it's for folks to indicate their racial ethnic identity, and then through the responses we're able to see if there's disproportionate dissatisfaction, or across the board. It also is something we look at with gender demographics as well, or gender identity demographics, just to sort of understand if there are disproportionate or lagging indicators when it comes to employee satisfaction and that kind of thing. The last time we've done a bureau-wide employee survey was 2019. I think you're referring to the CAN report, and I'm familiar with it, and I've read through it. I'm a data analyst, and so I look at sort of like the data that was used and that kind of thing. There's some demographic data that was used in that report that is not up to date and is from there's lots of different data sources that folks use for that demographic data as well. So there's some it's a very useful report, and I think it's something we should use carrying forward, but it's not something that Margaret or I was involved with specifically a lot.
I'm wondering
Riley,
if
I noticed,
maybe other park.
Sorry, I noticed Kenya is on the in the meeting, and Kenya, possibly you could jump in regarding the CAN report.
Yeah, the CAN, the City African American Network, they did release a report. They also had a survey. They recently had a work session with City Council. If you go back to the video log, if you did not watch that, you can watch the work session. It was a great work session. I think it was about two weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago. The citywide equity managers, we do meet monthly with BHR, and we have started to address some of the issues that CAN brought up in the work session. And we're looking at how we can support BHR. And some folks are members of CAN who are equity managers. Some folks may not be. We've also discussed it citywide with a large number of African-American staff. OEHR, they host a monthly gathering of Black employees called Black Space. So there are multiple conversations happening citywide. Some folks, who, identify as, Black African American, are, engaged in, those conversations. So through, we, the CAN network, we have a monthly lunch. We have Black Space. So there's many opportunities where information is being shared amongst African American staff, and this is citywide. It's not specific to Bureau, and those recommendations are going to equity managers, and we are sharing that information with BHR.
Thank you. Adrienne?
Yeah, this is a kind of a quick comment and also somewhat of a question to both probably Margaret and Todd. So earlier when we talked about vaccination, I was going to bring this up, but it probably fits better in, worker health and safety. I'm wondering if you've gone down the road of considering requiring community vaccination for indoor facilities. I think it's important worker health and safety issue, but also maybe even more importantly, that we have as Portland Parks and Rec the opportunity to incentivize, our highest risk populations to get vaccinated if we require that. I just returned from New York and Chicago on a trip, and every indoor facility is requiring it. It seems overwhelming, but it's actually, when you get in the rhythm, pretty simple to show a photo of vaccination status and ID. We're not here yet in Oregon, but we may actually get to it pretty quickly. The rates have been falling, but they're now flattening out and going to probably turn around again for a winter peak. More and more epidemiologists are saying this is sort of here to stay for a while. So I would just love, to hear what you've thought about that, and if you want to be on the forefront of what is probably going to be a requirement.
So I can take a crack at this and then others can jump in. So Portland Parks and Recreation has followed public health guidance, whether it's been from CDC or our own OHA here in the state, or then Multnomah County Public Health, and then City Council. And then, as you saw, policy came out this week for Office of Management and Finance. We actually aren't creating our own public health guidance as a bureau. So I think it's really unlikely that we'll come up with our own standard or protocol specifically for community centers, but not other city public facilities. We're definitely a stakeholder in these citywide policy development conversations that happen at the city level, and we definitely have our say and make our comments. So your advocacy makes a difference in that conversation, but we won't be like going out on our own and creating our own policy.
Thank you, Todd. I had a question, getting back to the initial workforce development presentation that Margaret and Riley gave, which was terrific. I wanted to talk a little bit more, if I could, about the process by which the applicants, that process, how smooth or not smooth that is. You talked a fair amount about the challenges of, the fact that there were, I think you said, over 3,000 applicants, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 were hired. And there was you rattled off a list of reasons that folks who may have applied weren't offered employment, and it ranged from they either secured other positions or weren't responsive or any variety of things. On the private sector side, I know that there's a lot of effort to provide immediate interviews so people can know if they're viable candidates or not right away, so that there isn't a process. You mentioned some of the job fairs that you indicated. I mean, I'm wondering if there are strategies that you're putting in place to do maybe immediate interviews at those at those job fairs so that people can kind of know where they stand in terms of their the viability of their candidacy, right? Because if you meet them at a job fair and then you go, okay, now go online and fill out this application, and then maybe you'll hear from somebody to get an interview, and some of these people, they want a job and they're ready to work. So can you talk a little bit about some of the strategies to smooth that process for the applicants and potential workforce to make that easier for them?
Certainly. So it really begins when we start doing our outreach. In addition to the how to apply sessions that we have been providing in our virtual career fairs, actually we're doing specific work sessions. We're putting together the training materials now, in which we will also record, so people don't have to make sure that they're there, but it's always accessible. That provides them not only how to apply with the organization, but how to interview, what to expect, because one of the main things is communication. So you meet someone, you talk to them, they apply, and then you don't hear anything right away. So we're actually putting in the training what to expect, what are the steps, what is the timeline that people can expect. And then we're also, as part of the lessons learned, working with our hiring supervisors and managers to take a look at how we can streamline the selection process. Recreation, for example, it was a huge lift, all of the positions that they were hiring for this summer. And so the applications would come in, but then to actually complete the interviews. So we're working with them now. Some of the ideas that we are exploring is to have what we're calling an entry interview, so that people are interviewed right away. That's the interview that you're talking about, Bonnie, where people are not waiting, but we actually, before they were called screening interviews, people might be familiar with that. We've changed it to an entry. It enters you into the system or into the interview process to see where you might be best placed, where in the city, what community centers, what types of positions. I should take a step back from that as well. We're also working with our recruitment team to restructure our recruitment announcements. We had over a dozen recruitment announcements open at one time, and there were people that were interested in multiple positions. And so now what we're looking at is we're looking at combining those efforts so that we can actually have less recruitments and be able to place people quicker through that. So there's a lot of different strategies that we're working on. We're actively working on it now. That's what we're spending these winter months, because we have recruitments that are open now. We're going to go full force into our spring hirings, really starting February, March. And so we're working through those details now. I see a lot of hands popping up, so I'm going to pause. I think it was Adina, Corbin, and then Kenya.
Thank you, Margaret. I just want to reiterate to the board, well, first of all, appreciate all of the ideas about how to be more efficient and how to be more responsive and how to, eliminate or minimize barriers. And I just want to reiterate that there is a process that is both, is codified for the city, and that BHR has, is the bureau that oversees the administration of human resource, recruitment, hiring, etc. That being said, we have strong shoulders, sharp elbows, and because we are one of the largest bureaus, and certainly the bureau with the largest number of seasonal casual staff, we sort of push the envelope all the time with them. And wherever we can make modifications and improvements to our processes within the bureau, we do. But there are a lot of constraints that are beyond our purview and beyond our control that we have to work within. So just, I probably should have prefaced everything with that, but my point is that we have a great relationship. We have two BHR business partners that are assigned to us who work for Human BHR and who are our liaisons. And we're pretty creative and resourceful in terms of both advocating for change where we think it's reasonable and possible, but also to sort of red flagging issues and concerns that they may not see from other bureaus because of our unique workforce. So just wanted to put that out there and appreciate Margaret for taking the charge on all that. Thank you.
Corbin's hand is up.
Thank you. I was wondering, as part of the recruitment process, do you ask if, is it part of the process to discuss any other languages that are spoken by potential applicants? Because I also see that as an opportunity to diversify the workforce linguistically. And I was wondering how is that operating under the recruitment process, or is it?
It actually, if you look at our recruitment announcements, there is an equity statement that also includes a statement to include that information. And then also, depending upon the position, we may actually call it out specifically, like our customer service center. We actually are specifically asking for that. It really depends upon the position, how it might be woven into the interview process, but when it seems like we should be including that, we most definitely do. I will say, from a workforce development perspective, when I was looking at making hiring decisions this year, it was definitely something that I took into mind. Our DEI trainer is multilingual. I am so excited about that. One of the additional part-time positions that was added to the team is multilingual. So, we're, as hiring supervisors and managers, it's either we're incorporating it. It is definitely really firmly embedded into the position, or we're considering it, to see how we can include it in the selection process. So, but if you look at the recruitment announcement specifically, and maybe that's something we can follow up and make sure that we send to the Parks Board. Maybe I can send it to Brian to include in the notes, but you'll see some specific language that calls out. It's very similar to our equity statement, or close to that.
Thank you.
Margaret, you might want to just mention the premium pay for languages as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you. How could I forget that? Really exciting. The City Council approved a pay differential for individuals that utilize their language skills during their course of employment, and it's $1 per hour premium assignment. There are 3 different ways in which someone can qualify for the pay differential. And one is it's embedded in their position. So certain classifications, it's embedded, like our analyst positions, coordinator positions, customer service, recreation leader, recreation coordinator. So our folks out at our community centers. And then also, even if it's not embedded within their existing classification, if it is deemed that the individual utilizes their language skills during the course of their employment, they can actually also request the premium assignment as well, or the premium pay. So it's a great benefit. We've been wanting to do this at Parks for years. Cynthia Castro, we started having conversation when she was a Parkey many years ago about bringing pay differential into the city, recognizing that other jurisdictions, other agencies, other organizations provide that. So she was instrumental in really helping move that forward, as well as other staff. But really exciting. It was announced, went into effect. People are now have the option of completing their request to be considered or approved for the pay differential. We're just working, or the Bureau of Human Resources, the City of Portland is working through the logistics to make that happen. But that was just announced, so that's really great news.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
If I'm a community member in need of a non-English language serving facility, how would I look that up? How would I find that that facility that will be able to help me.
Well, we also have the language access line. And Kenya, do you want to jump in on that one? Because I know that the language access plan is in your portfolio.
So we recently updated everyone in the Bureau, their email signature to include information on meaningful access. So if someone calls customer service, for example, or reach out to us, everyone is equipped with one of our service providers language line that creates translation for someone. It also applies if someone walks into one of our facilities or our community centers, for example, and if English is not their primary or first language, they have tools in place such as posters on a desktop where they can point to their language, and the frontline staff will actually call language line and connect them via a three-way conversation. We also provide some staff with stickers on the back of their mobile phones. So if they're out in the field, they can actually dial language line, put it on speakerphone, have a translator speak there right there on site. There's also an app available on our mobile devices for some staff where if you need American Sign Language, you can actually use a video chat, and the person will actually sign live right there on the spot for someone who may need that service also. So there's multiple things in place for anyone who may not speak English, or need translations. In some aspects also, on Tim's team, the actual materials are actually translated into English, Spanish, Vietnamese, simple Chinese, and also Russian. So that's also just a basic practice here in the Bureau.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Okay, do we have any other questions for Margaret or Riley? Thank you for that great presentation and for fielding all of our questions. Like I said, I'm personally still interested in understanding more about the strategies of removing barriers, understanding that there are, some regulatory issues that need to be addressed, of course. With that, we'll move into the next agenda items topic of our agenda. And it does sound like we do want to talk a little bit more about the general time of the meetings, which we'll try and make some space for at the next general meeting. Just to let folks know, we are talking about the Burnside Bridge, which David mentioned, as well as the level of service analysis. I think level of service, we're probably targeting January, so probably Burnside Bridge for February or thereabouts, and then anything else that comes up. Are there other topics that any other board members or staff members had that they felt were important to put on our radar for future board meetings? Hearing none, I will open up to the floor for anything that anyone has. Oh, Burnside Bridge is coming to City Council in early December. Yeah, I was not aware of that. Maybe David and Randy, Patty and Randy may have been more aware of that because they're on that committee. It looks like Randy looks like he's signed off. I'm not sure. David, were you aware of that?
Yeah, there was some discussion that it was going, I don't know what was going to be presented to the council, if it was recommendations, if it was budget reconciliation, I didn't know what that was, but yes, we did talk about the fact that there was going to be some presentation to the council in December.
Okay.
Bonnie?
Lauren.
So I think what they're doing is that they're trying to get the commissioners on board with them moving forward with their approach to kind of slim down the scope of the bridge. I think that's their ultimate goal, but more to come on that.
Okay, so the issue of value engineering. Great. And then Adrian has a comment about community center hours and future plans for best possible service. Are you talking in the context of level of service, Adrian, or is that something else that I'm missing?
And maybe it's a quick response, but I'm wondering if community centers are back up to their old schedules and, especially with increased funding, if we anticipate that increasing and it, just maybe a future agenda item. I'm not sure how long the discussion is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe Adina, would you mind addressing that in your next director's report? Because that's actually a good question. I don't know the degree to which community centers are actually back at their prior level of service or not.
Well, we have Maximo on the call and he can probably answer it pretty quickly, but then we can delve into whether or not we want to expand those later.
Yeah, do you want to give a Cliff Notes answer, Maximo, in the couple minutes we have left?
Sure. Yeah, we do have modified hours for our community centers that continue on through our fall term. We are looking to expand those here in the upcoming winter session, which will start in early January. And so our plan is to continue to monitor health and safety guidelines as well as staffing availability to make sure that we can continue to operate those safely. So we can definitely provide a report of that in the near future.
Thank you. All right, so if there's nothing else, we will adjourn for today. Oh, Erin's hand is
I
up.
have one thing I've talked about a little bit before, but I'd love to continue to learn for parks to be thinking about preschool for all. So preschool for all is coming, preschool programming. I know it's limited preschool programming at PPR, but I think once workforce continues, there's going to just be a huge need for good quality preschool and preschool for all, preschool, free preschool eventually, I guess. And there's going to be a problem with locations, the ability to actually have preschools in different areas. So I'd love to hear if there's any future planning for expanding that or thoughts on that, how PPR could help with that really dire need existing, and I think in the future going to get even worse.
Thank you, Erin. I think that's also related to community service programming. So maybe we'll have a expanded topic on that at a future agenda. So thank you for all your input. Thank you, Margaret and Riley, for your presentation and for everybody's contributions. And we'll see you next month. If there's anything that you can think of in the meantime, please don't hesitate to shoot me and Casey an email.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Brian, for joining us and helping take notes.